You're listening to JoCo's One Small Step, a podcast framework provided by National Public Radio's StoryCorps. One Small Step is an effort to remind us of the humanity in everyone, even those with whom we disagree. Each episode brings two Johnson County, Kansas strangers with different political views together to have a conversation. This episode is presented by United Community Services of Johnson County with support from Resurrection, a United Methodist church. In this conversation, we'll hear from Missy and Tom. Missy, a registered Democrat, was a social worker for 13 years before staying home with her two children, who are now teenagers. She then taught preschool for 12 years before returning to social services work. Missy and her husband have been married for 23 years, and she's happiest with family and friends and her cats, and loves being musical and creative. Her dad recently passed away, so she's navigating loss and finding a new sense of normal. Tom, a registered Republican, is active in his community and committed to equality of opportunity. He is generally on the more progressive side of social issues, and he says he registered as a Republican because he wants to help bring about change within the party. He prefers calm discussions of varying perspectives and is against polarity of views. He is a grandparent who enjoys playing bridge, serving on community boards, and rooting for the Kansas City Chiefs. Let's listen in.
When I first read it, I thought, Tom sounds a lot like me.
I'm sorry to hear that, for your sake.
No, I noticed, I don't know, if thinking about something that stood out in your bio, you're a grandparent, a grandpa, and active in your community, and you like to play bridge and serve on community boards. I'm not really a football person, so that's why the Chiefs part didn't stand out to me. But
so you didn't stay up till midnight
I
last
did
night?
not.
Yeah.
I Google the scores the next day.
That's fair enough.
That's how I do the Chiefs.
That's fair enough.
But yeah, I love that. I love that you're a grandpa. Grandpas are so important, and that you're active in your community. And when I read playing bridge, my grandma, who I called Granny, played bridge for years and tried to teach me, and that just didn't go very well. So.
My wife's the same way. She says, I'm glad you go out 3 or 4 days a week to play bridge for 2 or 3 hours, and it keeps your mind active.
Wow, that's a lot.
And it's social, so you're interacting. And they often say that a good dementia prevention is to keep your mind active and to keep your social skills active. And so that's really the reason I play bridge. It's not because I'm very good at it. It's just a good social activity with a great mental stimulation. So I enjoy that a lot.
Yeah. And I think I did kind of giggle because it says you don't like to discuss. Well, you do. You do like to discuss different perspectives, but you like them to be calm.
Well, the biggest thing I don't like is polarity. And it bothers me that so often, if I think this and you don't agree, then you think I'm wrong. And if you think I'm wrong, well, I think you're wrong. And that really, to me, is not a healthy way either to solve problems or to communicate with one another. So that's my basic bias against polarity.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm moving on to, well, I thought it was one of the questions. It was somewhere. Why did we, okay, it is number one. Why did you want to do the interview today? And that was, I mean, when I read this, I joked earlier, my husband said, what did you get involved in? But I just read that and I thought, well, that is what stood out to me, is sort of being a part of maybe a solution to, you referred to it as the polarity piece, because I don't think you can deny that in these days. If someone was here and said, well, no, things aren't that way, I would think, I don't think we're living in the same world.
Yeah, my biggest frustration is that life lives in black and white.
Yeah.
I don't mean that racially. I just mean in opposite extremes. And for my bias, I just don't like extremes. And I don't like presuming there's a right way and a wrong way. I like to think that there's ways to communicate that can help us work together to build a better tomorrow without being trite about it.
Yeah, I love that. Which is probably why somebody got you on their board, right? You says you're on community boards. I mean, I would think that would be those are skills that you need when you're working in the community and.
Yeah, well, I'm a retired healthcare executive, and so many of the boards on which I serve are kind of spin-offs from that. I'm on a community mental health center board, and I'm on the Crittenton Center, which is you may know that from your social work areas, but that's the Children's Center for Behavioral Health. And so I'm active on those community boards, and I hope to be able to make a difference and to help those programs better meet the needs of the community and to be able to communicate to the community what we're trying to accomplish and to hear from the community what the problems are so that I can bring them back to the institution or program and try to do what we can to better meet the unmet needs of our community. So that's my community board orientation.
You're speaking my language. Who has been someone either very influential or the most influential person in your life, and what did they teach you?
The most influential person in my life was my father. And I always remember I was maybe 10 years old. He and I walking down the street together to the local grocery store.
That's what I was afraid of.
What?
Oh, I was afraid I would cry.
Oh. I didn't mean to make you cry.
It's not your fault.
But at any rate, we walked by this group of kids who were sitting in the back of their pickup trucks, and I kind of looked at them as I wasn't of great means myself, but I just thought I was better than they were. And they said hello, and I might have waved. And as we were going home, my father said, "Why didn't you speak to them?" Now, Tom, we're all built different. We need to celebrate our differences and not look down on differences, because for anybody that you want to look down on, there'll be 10 who will want to look down on you. So let us not look down on people. Let us just recognize that we're all built different. Let's celebrate those differences and work together to make a better tomorrow. Yeah. And that orientation that he brought to me was just fantastic. And I like to think that I took that to my career and now to my volunteer activities. So who was your most influential
Well, I was going to
person?
say my dad too. And so that's why, and you said your dad, I'm like, oh, that was my concern about doing this, is I'm like, oh, you're going to get emotional. I don't know. No, it's my dad too. And it's funny because my dad passed 6 months ago at the age of 75. So I'm guessing your dad was older. But when you say like how your dad said those things, that is like my dad. I mean, he had those, not just phrases, but he had those statements that, they stick with you. Yeah. And, as I thought about him being my most influential, it wasn't because we had a perfect relationship.
No such thing as a perfect relationship.
But I thought, okay, well, that's interesting, because I think you think, oh, it's going to be this person that you just had this amazing relationship with and everything was grand. At least that's how I think of it. But I'm like, no, it's not because the relationship was perfect, but it was, I guess, the impact and those really strong statements, I guess, that weren't opinions. They were statements to make me better. Sure. And it sounds like your dad too. Yeah, it's just like your dad wanted you.
Gentle kindness.
Right. Yeah.
Gentle guidance.
Yeah. And my dad's wasn't always gentle. He was not abusive or physical, but his words were not always gentle, but the message was very strong and for my benefit, Yeah. So sorry to cry.
No, it's important to have our own feelings and So, Missy, what are your political beliefs or values?
I will just say it. I don't mind saying it. If you want to know how I'm a registered Democratic voter. I vote in almost every election. I mean, I haven't not voted in, I would say, over 20 years. And so I think that's a label, right?
And I hate labels.
Yeah. I mean, labels. I think labels are a good identifier, but I want to know more. I want to know more of the details. And I guess if you wanted to know why, and why do I mostly vote that way, I feel like I'm just a strong believer in helping the underserved, thinking about people that are different from me as far as people of color, LGBTQ people, women. Obviously, I am a woman, but I feel like that's why that party aligns more for me, because I feel like they lift up those groups that I feel like maybe need more attention, more equality in our society. So, yeah.
Well, originally I thought we were matched up because of our polar opposite views, and I hope I didn't miscommunicate who I was, and I hope you didn't miscommunicate who you were, but we probably have more in common than not. When I was going to school, I was taught the principle of thinking about pragmatic idealism. So when I think of idealism, I think along your lines of equal opportunity, equal rates of maternal and infant care, mortality rates, and equal education opportunities, and things of that nature. So I often will define what my ideal state is. Absence of disparity, whether it's disparity of income, disparity of education, disparity of health outcomes. So my ideal is to have there be less disparity in this world than there is right now, in my opinion. And then if that's my idealism, my next step in that is, what are the pragmatic ways to meet my idealistic goals and expectations? And so to me, that's where the pragmatism comes in. and to me, that's where pragmatism often fails in political discourse, because we know my way is right, so why do I have to listen to your right? And often it's the other way around. And because I'm of that persuasion of there's no right answer, but that we'll come up with a better, more pragmatic answer if we chat together from our varying perspectives. And if we could first agree on an ideal, equal education, equal health status, equal whatever, then we could then perhaps talk through how can we best move towards solutions. And so you're a registered Democrat, as you indicate, because the Democratic Party tends to speak more willingly and comfortably regarding what I would call my ideals. And there's sometimes a belief that the Republican side of the aisle is less receptive to addressing what you and I might call our ideals that we want to work on. And so I personally am a registered Republican, but selfishly, and perhaps selfishly on your behalf as well, I wanted to register as a Republican so that I could have more influence on the positions of the Republican Party and have more influence on the Republican candidates, in hopes that I could be successful in my very small way of trying to move the Republican needle more towards a moderate position, so that the more moderate position would be more willing to have a healthy discourse with the other side of the aisle. And there's that notion of, in this day and age, if you reach across the aisle the stereotype is you're reaching to come to common ground. But in today's environment, if you reach across the aisle, you might end up with a punch in the nose. Mm-hmm. And it's the punch in the nose that I do not like. And I'm very in favor of working towards ideals with a common ground and sharing perspectives, mm-hmm. and not have them dominated by excess ego or excess money influence.
Right, money. I was thinking money.
And move towards actually thinking about what the issues are, mm-hmm. and how we can share perspectives to come out to a better solution than any single side could come up with.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting.
Another political philosophy that I developed too many years ago, probably back when you were a kid, was that some view that the political outcome for problem solving is sometimes better served by not having either party in control of House, mm-hmm. Senate, and presidency, because they all do their thing together, have zero regard for what the others are doing, and just gang up and move on. And then after a while, we'll discover, well, that didn't work very well. Then pretty soon the pendulum swings the other way, mm-hmm. and it goes the other way, and everybody's that way. And so you don't have checks and balances, mm-hmm. of perspectives, mm-hmm. which to me is sad.
Yeah, very much so. Well, it's interesting. I guess, as you're talking, I think, I don't know. I totally understand your perspective, and I think how...
Which is not to make it right. It's just a perspective.
It's just a perspective, and I think, how is that working? It wasn't it Dr. Phil that said, how's that working for you? Because I think, as you're speaking about being part of a party, but you want to influence in a certain way, that's very admirable. And I think, have you found that that's been successful, or maybe you don't measure it in terms of that?
Well,
that may not be the right word.
I measure success by being hopeful that there can be healthy discourse on key issues. Mm-hmm. And I often consider myself a disenfranchised mad moderate. Mm-hmm. Mad because it makes me angry that I'm disenfranchised, and mad because the two extremes go at each other so much, mm-hmm. that there isn't, in my view, healthy discourse as to what the problem is that we're trying to solve. Mm-hmm. And that's just frustrating to me. Mm-hmm. Have you felt misunderstood by people with different beliefs than you? And if so, how?
I think part of the place that we're in, and I'll admittedly say that the place I'm in is that I think as I get older and you move into our current reality, I feel like people around me, I don't have as many people around me that would misunderstand me, because I don't know about your experiences, but I feel like over the last 5-6 years, I feel like you sort of, I'm not going to say you, meaning not just you, everyone. I'm going to speak for
the royal
myself.
We tend to interact with folks that we have something in common with, which is often a political view as well.
Right. And so I feel like over the last few years, that bubble of who we were with is sort of shrunk, because I feel like over the last few years, my views have gotten, I don't know if stronger is the word, but it's harder to then, I guess, allow people in that you just think, what? It's harder to let those people in. So I personally don't feel misunderstood by those people, or by people so much, because I'm sure what's also happened is that people that don't think how I do, they've cut me out too, in a way. That's happening, I think, in general. But I do, I mean, what I do, this question does speak to me as far as people in my life that are loved ones and this and that, and that are part of maybe different communities that sort of get that flack in society, the LGBTQ community. I have people very close in my life. And I feel like that's the part that I just want to stand up on a chair and scream, because that's where I feel, and that's just one example, I feel that's where we sort of see these misunderstandings. And so I don't feel like it's really a personal thing for me, but I see it more as the people I care about. That, you know, and I'm speaking of people that are younger than me as well. I do think you get to an age, the older you get, the more you just don't really care as much if people misunderstand you. Not that I don't care, but you do sort of, as a woman, you know, aging, I feel more confident in who I am. And so you do sort of tune out, I guess, a little bit of that. So that when I think about being misunderstood, I don't view it as much as myself. I view it more as different populations, and I sort of react strongly to that.
Well, I have someone close to me who is on the conservative liberal continuum, probably more liberal. And she's discovered that some of her lifelong friends either have become more conservative, or as time has evolved, the importance to one or both of them gets more divisive. Mm-hmm. And recently she said, if you're going to be supportive of that candidate, you can't be my friend. Mm-hmm. And that strikes me as shallow. Mm-hmm. It strikes me as immature, even though she was 75 years old, or however old she is. And
can still be immature. 75.
Yeah,
I mean, right?
You know, there's something about that doesn't
right,
feel it. But
right.
But to me, it's an example of the polarity
mm-hmm.
that we referenced earlier. That if you live in your own cocoon, and you can't focus on your common interests, mm-hmm. and instead end up saying, if you support that candidate, you can no longer be my friend. Mm-hmm. Well, that's hurtful to this person who was hurt by that remark. And then you ask yourself, well, what kind of friend is that? Mm-hmm. And so.
Yeah, I mean, I know many. I have not said that to anyone, but I have friends that have said that to other people. And yeah, that I feel like that's where we're at. That's the place we're in, right?
And to me, it's very sad. Mm-hmm. I mean, the easy thing to do is, okay, let's just agree we're not going to talk politics, and let's enjoy talking about the kids and the grandkids and mm-hmm. our volunteer work and shopping together and whatever it is that people do together. But
you know what's funny about you saying that is because that's how I grew up too. What are you not supposed to talk about? Religion and politics. Maybe that was wrong. Maybe it was wrong to have grown up with this notion that we shouldn't talk about those things. And I thought maybe that's kind of what's gotten us to this place. We haven't grown, I don't know about you. I haven't grown up with an acceptance of talking about that. I don't like talking about that. I mean, with the people I'm close to, yes, it's very natural. It's easy. It's especially easy if you have the same opinions and beliefs as people, right?
To me, that's the challenge. When you don't have the
Right.
same opinions, mm-hmm. do you just choose not to talk about those topics mm-hmm. and move on, and I'll talk about bridge and the weather and our grandkids rather
Right.
than talk about something else?
Mm-hmm.
I've got a friend that I play bridge with, and we'll walk together just to get a little exercise sometimes. And I remember him saying a year or so ago, Tom, tell me about white privilege. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, white privilege comes from the concept that those of us who are white were born on third base and we think we hit a triple. Whereas those not white are trying to make it to the dugout and with any luck, they'll get to the on-deck circle while here we are on third base. I said, that's a sports analogy for white privilege. And his reply was, well, I always worked hard for what I got, so I don't know what your point is.
Yeah.
And so it just became easier to walk and talk about bridge and the weather than it was to have a racial debate because I think he was born on third base and he thinks he hit a triple. So that's an example of it can be hard to talk about. And when it is hard to talk about, sometimes it's easier to not address the matter because I'm not going to change his view on white privilege, and he's not going to change my view on white privilege or inadequacy of equal opportunity that I happen to think that African Americans have, but that's just my belief, and it doesn't make me right, and it doesn't make him wrong. So let's talk about the Chiefs.
And let's put everything as a baseball reference, right? I love baseball. That's my sport.
Oh, so I hit a home run when I told you we were born on third base and we think we hit a triple.
Right. Oh my goodness, that's funny. Do you ever feel troubled by people with the same beliefs as you? People from your own side of the aisle and how they communicate those beliefs to others?
If someone has my belief and they use our shared belief as a way to talk down to others, that is offensive to me. And the next challenge is if they're doing that and saying that to me, I'm comfortable saying, well, there is another point of view on that, and I bet if you talk to my friend Will, he would say, I'm the one that couldn't go to this school, and I'm the one that was redlined for my loan, and I'm the one who couldn't get an education, and so he might tell you a little bit about white privilege. It's a little bit different than the way I would. And so we can have that discussion on we think either we think alike or we don't think alike about that, and it's okay to do it in this little circle. The challenge to me is when the friend, whether of the same belief or opposite belief, takes out what I might call a prejudice against those to whom they are prejudiced, and that becomes a challenge for me. And how do you say that's wrong? You ought not do that. Because what's right, what's wrong, and who am I to decide that what he just said I did was wrong? It's just different from mine. Just hope that however he communicates, he doesn't do it to be hurtful to the other party.
Yeah, that's, I think, the communication. That's when you, when we looked at that question, it seems like that's the troubling part. It always feels better, right, when someone thinks and believes the way that we do. But I think the struggle and the question of do I ever feel troubled is yes, because I feel like people in power and people that make the decisions are always supposed to be better than me. I've never run for office because I feel like those people are better than me. They are more eloquent in their speech. They're smarter than me. They have better skills in X, Y, and Z. And so then when you hear things that are hateful, argumentative, not classy, you kind of think, whatever happened to thinking that people in higher up positions were, I guess, sort of better than me?
I think they've come to believe that they are better than you.
Yes.
And they are not at all.
Right.
That would be my opinion.
Yeah.
You'd asked me earlier about volunteer work, and it kind of ties into these differences. When I worked, I was kind of a consensus builder. And we had a small hospital and a big hospital, and I'd try to help them realize that we're both in the healthcare field, and you're rural and I'm urban, but we're still in this together. And so I was a consensus builder. And then when I got to these volunteer boards that we talked about earlier, I found myself challenging the conventional wisdom And so I went from consensus building to what I politely call pain in the nudge. And I went to a faculty member, and I said, how did I go from consensus builder to a pain in the nudge? And he said, well, Tom, I'll tell you what you're doing. He said, you're very good at comforting the afflicted. So if somebody is feeling afflicted, you comfort them and try to let them understand that they have the same needs and desires that the other guy does. We just have to work towards it together. He said, but what you're doing when you're becoming a pain in the nudge is that you are afflicting the comfortable. If everybody is comfortable with the status quo, and you say, time out, let's think about this versus that, and might there be a better way to do it, even though it's working. So you can afflict the comfortable at the same time that you comfort the afflicted. And I don't know what the parallel analogy would be within the political realm, but to me, each party feels so comfortable in their ways, and there isn't anybody out there to afflict that comfort, to bring them to think about alternative ways to approach whatever problem we may be addressing. So,
I just think it's kind of funny because you're thinking, oh my gosh, who's going to be sitting across from me? And, hearing the comments from my husband, I don't remember what he said, something about, don't let anybody, because he thought too it was going to, or it was something in reference to arguing. I can't remember what he said, but so it is kind of funny that you come in with defenses, I would say. I don't know about you, but I came in a little on guard, a little defensive, and thinking, oh my gosh, just because it's unexpected, right? And we did have the notion that you were going to be very different from me. And so, but, as I'm reading your bio, I feel like all those defenses sort of went away because I could pick out words, and then not only pick out words that I could relate to as far as what you do, but then when you're speaking, I thought of my dad, and then when you talked about your dad, I think your dad sounds like my dad. Different generation.
I think you just call me old.
No, I call myself old a lot. So I would say that's a nice surprise.
And I will observe that my wife had the same concerns or questions of perhaps your husband of don't get bullied or and instead we're having a conciliatory discussion. It's almost conciliatory towards the absence of conflict, but it's not because we're trying to avoid conflict. It's that we don't have much conflicting views on things. And when I just read of your social work background, well, that social work background stereotypically is often going to be looking out for the betterment of the whole community. And well, I've got my MBA, but that doesn't prevent me from wanting something for the betterment of the community, which ties back to my pragmatic idealism, which, so in a way, for the benefit of this exercise, it's probably too bad that we're more alike than we are different, because we may not be fulfilling the mission of the one small step exercise.
Yeah, but I will say, it is nice to, I don't know, it's nice to hear what you're saying when you say, that you're a registered Republican. When someone says they're a registered Republican to me, I think A, B, C through X, Y, Z. And I just think, yeah, okay, I've never been that. Never want to be that. Don't think I'll ever be that. And so it's the label. You used that word earlier. It's the label. And so I some people hate labels. I always say a label is a starting point. Give me more about the label. I'm in mental health. I mean, you were in the medical field. We do lots of labels, right?
Oh,
we
absolutely.
diagnose, we label.
Oh, absolutely.
This and that. And I don't have a huge problem with a label, but I want to know more.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like that was the benefit of this, that the label that you labeled yourself as, that's a challenge for me. But then when you find out more that it becomes, we were able to have a good conversation. And, mm-hmm.
Well, my wife still doesn't understand why I'm a registered Republican. But
you tell your wife I like her.
well, that's good.
And tell her I wasn't a bully.
Oh,
I hope
no,
not.
no.
I don't want to bully anybody.
No, actually,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know whether she was hoping or not hoping that we would be having the kind of conversation that she sometimes has with her friends. If you're going to think like that, you can't be my friend anymore. Mm-hmm. Well, if you think like that, I'm not going to sit at this table anymore. Well, that's not.
But isn't it interesting that your spouse, my spouse, I didn't necessarily assume that. I was a little concerned. But isn't it interesting that both our spouses imagined this being a duke out, so to speak, that we were going to
in a perverse way, I wish it had been.
Mm-hmm.
Just because if we had been duking it out, and if we could come to a common understanding about, well, let's talk about pragmatic idealism. Mm-hmm. Okay, let's just think of the ideal. Now let's think about how each of us might move towards that ideal. And if they're totally different ways to do it, then that would have been an interesting dialogue.
Yeah.
Because my hope, if I was across the table from somebody a lot different from my views, would be, it's okay that you think like that, but can we back up to an ideal? Mm-hmm. I mean, do we believe in equal opportunity or infant mortality rates similarly, or whatever it might be? And if we agree that that's a good thing, to then have a discussion on how we can address those from a rightish versus a leftish perspective, arguably might have been a more challenging dialogue than what we had. Mm-hmm. And there's no wrong dialogue. I don't mean to suggest that, but we didn't have to duke it out from conflicting perspectives, because we sort of agree on the same ideals, and sort of agree all perspectives would be better served working together towards the common ideal than either bickering about it or following the almighty dollar, because there's more votes. There's more money if I vote like this, and there's less money if I vote like that, and so that's getting back to the political side, which is kind of sad to me.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for listening to this One Small Step conversation, presented by United Community Services of Johnson County. UCS provides data analysis, collaborative planning, and resources to enhance the availability and delivery of health and human services in Johnson County, Kansas. For more information, visit ucsjoco.org. This episode is made possible with support from Resurrection, a United Methodist Church.